What happened to Malaysia Airlines flight MH370? What actually took down this plane? Well, to be honest, that est the question that the experts have been trying to answer since this plane disappeared from radar back in 2014. So, today, we're going to do our best to answer this question. This is the story of Malaysia Airlines flight MH370. On March 8, 2014, flight MH370 departed Kuala Lumpur International Airport just after midnight. It was a clear night. The aircraft, a Boeing 777, one of the safest planes ever built, was piloted by Captain Zaharie Ahmad Shah, a respected veteran with over 18,000 flight hours. His co-pilot was First Officer Selamat, who was relatively less experienced but considered competent. There were 227 passengers and 12 crew members on board. Most were from China. They were headed to Beijing on a routine flight that had been planned for months. As MH370 climbed through the sky, everything appeared normal. The climb, the course, the handoff between air traffic controllers. Everything was in order. But then, at 1:19 a.m., the co-pilot signed off from Malaysian airspace with the words, "Good night, Malaysian 370." Moments later, the plane disappeared from civilian radar. There was no distress call, no emergency signals. Nothing. It was as if the plane had shut off its transponder to avoid detection, which would make sense if it were being hijacked. But why else would a commercial airliner disappear without a trace? For the next 5 hours, air traffic controllers and military bases around the region scrambled to figure out what had happened to the missing jet. There was no sign of smoke or fire in the sky. No unusual sounds had been reported. Nothing. Then a U.S. military radar detected the plane flying west, away from its original flight path, suggesting a deliberate change in direction. This turned out to be the last confirmed sighting of the plane. By 7:24 a.m., flight MH370 have reached its cruising altitude and be approaching the coast of Vietnam. But there was no sign of the plane. After failing to establish contact, the authorities realized they didn't know where MH370 was. The search and rescue operation was immediately put into action. Combing through the South China Sea, the Vietnamese Air Force deployed planes and ships to the area, but found no sign of the missing aircraft. By 10:24 a.m., the search had expanded to the waters off the Malay Peninsula, and the search and rescue mission headquarters was established in the city of Sabang Jaya. In the meantime, the airline tried calling the families of the passengers and letting them know their loved ones might have been involved in an accident. As they prepared for the worst, the Malaysian government was busy telling the press that everything was under control. "We are doing everything that needs to be done," said the transport minister. "We have launched a full investigation. The safety of our airspace is guaranteed." But behind the scenes, the clock was ticking and the situation was far from under control. Over the next few days, ships and planes from 14 countries joined the hunt. The Australian and Chinese governments provided assistance. But as the days passed, the hope of finding the plane faded. The world had seen plenty of plane crashes before, but this was different. This plane seemed to have vanished into thin air. On March 12th, 4 days after the plane went missing, the Malaysian Prime Minister announced that the search would be expanded to the southern Indian Ocean based on new data that had come to light. According to this new data, the plane had stayed in the air for nearly 7 more hours after losing contact. And instead of crashing into the sea right away, it flew for hundreds of miles following an unknown path. Then it turned back toward the Malacca Strait, perhaps hoping to find a new route home. But the plane ran out of fuel and crashed somewhere in the middle of the Indian Ocean. It was a massive area. Over 60,000 square kilometers, almost the size of New Zealand, but it was also one of the loneliest places in the world. Here, the waves were wild and the winds were strong, making it difficult to fly. The Indian Ocean had swallowed the plane whole. The Prime Minister ended his speech with these heartbreaking words. I'm afraid that the disappearance of MH370 is a tragedy on an unimaginable scale. That's when the race to find the wreckage began. The Australian and Chinese governments worked together to map the seabed, which would help focus the search efforts. Planes from Australia, China, and the United States flew over the Indian Ocean looking for any signs of life. Ships combed through the waves, hoping to spot some wreckage. But the ocean was vast and the weather was rough. It would take months to cover all that ground, but slowly, as if the ocean itself were giving up its secrets, clues started appearing. In July 2015, a piece of plane debris washed up on the shores of Reunion Island, a small volcanic island in the Indian Ocean. Despite these findings, it would take another 4 years before the ocean gave up its biggest prize. In March 2019, a farmer in the northwest of Cambodia came across some unusual plane parts in his field. He had no idea what they were, but when the Cambodian authorities tested the metal, they got a match. It was from the same plane that had crashed in the Indian Ocean. Soon after, a second piece of wreckage was found in the same area. Both pieces had MH370 written on them, confirming beyond any doubt that the plane had indeed crashed in Cambodia. And yet, for all the wreckage that has been found, the main wreckage, the flight recorders, the so-called black boxers, remain missing. The ocean has not given up its deepest secrets. So now, let's talk about theories. As the search continued and the investigation deepened, theories about what happened to MH370 multiplied. Was it a hijacking? Some believed terrorists had taken control of the plane and diverted its course. Others argued that it wasn't likely since no ransom demands were ever made. Was it pilot suicide? Investigators examined Captain Zaharie's flight simulator, which contained a program with a flight path remarkably similar to the one MH370 took. But could a pilot really divert a plane for 7 hours without anyone noticing? Was it mechanical failure? A sudden fire, loss of oxygen, or some catastrophic event that left everyone on board unconscious as the plane flew on autopilot until it ran out of fuel? Perhaps. But then what happened to the pilots? Did they, too, fall unconscious and remain unnoticed? Or did someone land the plane and then escape undetected? Each theory raised more questions than answers. In the end, here's what we know for sure. On March 8, 2014, flight MH370 took off from Kuala Lumpur, carrying 239 people towards Beijing. Less than an hour into the flight, the plane changed course and flew for another 7 hours before running out of fuel and crashing into the Indian Ocean. There is no evidence of foul play. There is no evidence of a technical problem. There is no evidence of a terror attack. All we have are questions. Why did the pilots deviate from their course? Why did they stay in the air for so long? Why is there no wreckage? And most importantly, why is there no answer? Perhaps the ocean knows the answers, but it's not ready to reveal them. The search for MH370 was the largest and most expensive in aviation history, costing over $160 million. It involved the expertise of the world's leading aviation and engineering teams. Every possible scenario was explored, every lead investigated, but despite all the effort, the mystery remains. The disappearance of flight MH370 shook the aviation industry. It forced a reevaluation of safety procedures and tracking methods. But the fact that even with today's technology, a plane can vanish without a trace is a sobering thought. If you like this kind of stuff, check out this video that I made about MH370 before. We'll see you guys next time. Bye.